Today, the United States and China are locked in the greatest rivalry in modern history. Military tension in the Pacific, trade wars, technology bans. Washington now sees Beijing as its number one threat. But just 50 years ago, China was a poor, isolated country. No significant military, no global influence, almost no economy. So how did China rise so fast? The answer is one of the greatest ironies in geopolitical history. The United States didn't just watch China grow. America built it with its own money, its own technology, and its own greed. The story begins in 1972. America was deep in the Cold War, losing ground to the Soviet Union. Moscow had allies across Eastern Europe, Asia, and Africa. President Nixon and his advisor Henry Kissinger had a radical idea. What if they opened relations with communist China to split Beijing from Moscow? It was a classic geopolitical move. Divide and conquer. Nixon flew to China. The world was shocked. For the first time in decades, China was open to the world, and American corporations immediately saw an opportunity. Over 1 billion people, willing to work for a fraction of American wages. By the 1980s, the great industrial migration had begun. American companies discovered they could multiply their profits overnight. Why pay an American worker $20 an hour when a Chinese worker costs 20 cents? The American Rust Belt collapsed. Millions of workers lost their jobs, while millions of jobs sailed across the Pacific. In China, the transformation was breathtaking. The Chinese economy grew at 10% per year for decades. Washington believed that wealth would bring democracy. They were dangerously wrong. China took the money, the technology, and the factories, and kept the Communist Party. Then came the year 2001. The United States championed China's entry into the World Trade Organization. President Clinton called it a win for both countries. Suddenly, Chinese goods flooded global markets with zero tariffs. 3 million more American manufacturing jobs disappeared in the following decade. But China didn't stay in cheap manufacturing. They climbed the technology ladder, step by step. Today, America depends on China for electronics, electric vehicles, and critical medicines. With its new wealth, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, buying influence across 150 countries. It wasn't until the 2010s that Washington finally woke up. The headlines were impossible to ignore. President Trump launched a trade war, slapping tariffs on Chinese goods. President Biden tried to cut off China's access to advanced semiconductors. But China responded by accelerating its own domestic technology programs. The wealth transferred from the U.S. allowed China to build the largest navy in the world by number of ships. In the South China Sea, Chinese military bases now challenge American dominance. America wanted cheap goods and corporate profits. What they got in return was a superpower rival funded by American dollars. In geopolitics, every decision has a consequence that echoes for generations. The question now is, can the United States contain the superpower it helped create? Or will the two superpowers find a way to coexist before the rivalry becomes something far more dangerous? The world you see on the news is just the surface. Hit subscribe, and we will see you in the next episode of Borders and Power. But there is one place where the US-China rivalry could turn into something far more dangerous: Taiwan. This small island of 23 million people produces over 90% of the world's most advanced computer chips. Without Taiwanese chips, there are no smartphones, no fighter jets, no artificial intelligence. China claims Taiwan as its own territory and has never ruled out using military force to take it. The United States has sold Taiwan billions of dollars in weapons and has promised to defend it. This is not just a territorial dispute. It is a battle for control of the technology that runs the modern world. If China ever took Taiwan, it would control the most critical choke point in the global economy. More important than the Strait of Hormuz. More important than the Panama Canal. The chip war is the new oil war, and Taiwan is sitting right in the middle of it. The Semiconductor War is already underway. In 2022, the United States passed the CHIPS Act, spending $53 billion to rebuild American chip manufacturing. Washington also banned the sale of advanced chips and chip-making equipment to China. The goal was simple: slow China down. But China responded by pouring hundreds of billions into its own semiconductor industry. Huawei, which Washington tried to destroy with sanctions, surprised the world in 2023. They released a new smartphone with an advanced chip made entirely in China. The message was clear: China will not be contained. Every technology America tries to block, China works twice as hard to develop at home. The race for technological supremacy is now the defining competition of the 21st century. And unlike the space race, this one affects every single person on the planet. While America focused on military power, China played a different game. In 2013, President Xi Jinping launched the Belt and Road Initiative. The idea was simple but brilliant. China would lend money to developing countries to build roads, ports, railways, and power plants. Over 150 countries signed up, from Africa to Southeast Asia, from Latin America to the Middle East. China built ports in Pakistan, railways in Kenya, and power plants in Serbia. In exchange, China gained something far more valuable than money: political influence, trade routes, and strategic access to resources around the world. Today, China is the largest trading partner of more countries than the United States. The empire of the 21st century is not built with armies. It is built with infrastructure loans and trade agreements. And while Washington debated, Beijing was quietly reshaping the world. The world you see on the news is just the surface. Beneath every headline, there is a story of geography, history, and power. A story of decisions made decades ago that still shape the world today. The United States and China are not just rivals. They are the product of each other's choices. And the choices they make next will define the next century. At Borders and Power, we believe that understanding the world is the first step to changing it. Every week, we break down the hidden forces behind the biggest stories on the planet. From trade wars to military alliances, from ancient borders to modern conflicts. We go beyond the headlines. We follow the power. If you want to understand why the world works the way it does, you are in the right place. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us every week. Because the real story is always deeper than what they show you. This is Borders and Power, and we will see you next time.